You know, back in 1992, a single court case didn't just tweak a law, it completely reshaped a nation's history. So today, we're going to dive into the landmark Mabo decision and figure out how it redefined the very idea of land ownership in Australia.
Can a court case really change how a whole nation understands land itself? It's a huge question. Think about it. For 200 years, Australian law was built on one specific version of history. In this case, it put that entire version on trial.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we need to understand the legal landscape before all this happened. Then, we'll jump right into the Mabo challenge itself. After that, we'll see how it led to this huge moment, the recognition of native title. And finally, we'll unpack what it all means for Australian law today.
Okay, so to really get the impact of Mabo, we have to go back. We have to understand the legal principle that was in charge in Australia for like 200 years. It was a foundation literally built on a concept that made Indigenous history, well, legally invisible.
So before Mabo, Australian common law was really all about this idea called terra nullius. You might have heard of it. It basically means land belonging to no one. The thinking was, before the British arrived, the land was empty. And because of that, all these complex, pre-existing indigenous laws and their deep connection to the land, they just weren't seen as a formal property interest in the eyes of the law. This legal blindness, as you can imagine, had absolutely devastating consequences.
And this is where everything changes. This is the turning point. A small group of people stood up and mounted a direct challenge to that entire framework. And in doing so, they forced a national reckoning with its own history.
The challenge came in the form of a court case, Mabo versus Queensland, number 2. And let me tell you, that name would be etched into Australian legal history forever.
So you might be wondering, how did this all go down? Well, it all started with a claim from a man named Eddie Mabo and other Meriam people from the Murray Islands. They argued that their traditional laws and customs gave them rights to their land. Now, this sounds straightforward, right? But legally, it was an earthquake. It forced the High Court of Australia to go back and re-examine the very foundations of property law, foundations that had been in place for 2 centuries.
And the result of that re-examination? Well, it was nothing short of groundbreaking. It literally created a whole new reality in Australian property law.
The result was this brand new legal concept, native title. For the very first time, the High Court recognized that Indigenous property interests did exist and that they could be protected under Australian common law. That legal vacuum that had existed for so long, it was finally filled. So, what does native title actually mean? Well, first off, it's a formal property interest. It's not just a cultural claim. It has real legal weight. Second, it's recognized within Australian common law. It's part of the system now. And what this really shows is that legal rights can evolve. The law isn't just some static, old document. It can change and grow to recognize deeper truths.
So let's zoom out a bit. What's the lasting significance of Mabo? What's the big picture here?
Yeah, this comparison really says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you have the before. That's a legal map of Australia that was basically blind to its own history, where Indigenous connection to the land was legally invisible. And on the right, you have the after, the new reality. It's a legal system that now sees and recognizes native title as a valid property interest, woven right into the fabric of the country.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Mabo was about so much more than just one island. It was a fundamental evolution of Australian law, because it finally dismantled that fiction of terra nullius. It forced the entire legal system to acknowledge a history and a system of laws that existed long before 1788.
And that leaves us with a really interesting question to think about. The Mabo case proved that our laws can evolve, that they can change to reflect a deeper understanding of history and of rights. So, as our society keeps changing, you have to wonder, what does the future of property look like?